Conor looks extremely loose, and Aldo looks like he's feeling the pressure of this moment.
Green trunks for the southpaw, the notorious Conor McGregor. Black trunks for the champion, Jose Aldo Jr.
Conor relaxed and smiling. Oh! He slapped him!
Conor McGregor is the new UFC featherweight champion of the world!
Mixed martial arts, or MMA, present itself as a regulated sport built on discipline, structure, and control. But the way fighters are covered in media often tells a very different story. It moves beyond the sport and into narrative, especially when you consider the early controversy in MMA. In modern combat sports media, no fighter sits closer to that blurred line between athletics and crime storytelling than Conor Notorious McGregor. Not because he is defined by crime, but because his career has been repeatedly framed through narratives of dominance, controversy, success, excess, and downfall.
The foggy June.
So I said I'd knock him out in the first round, and I knocked him out in the first round. You can call me Mystic Mac because I predict these things.
Conor McGregor comes from Crumlin in Dublin, a working class area that is often emphasized in coverage of his background, in the same place where he boxes today and has the Black Forge Inn, his own pub. In media terms, the origin story matters. It sets up a familiar narrative structure: the outsider, the underdog, the individual trying to escape limitation through ambition and risk. It's the classic story told through all crime movies and stories. This aligns with what our course describes as the construction of archetypes in crime and media storytelling, particularly the rogue figure who bends rules in pursuit of success. McGregor's rise in MMA was extremely fast, and extremely fast not just to a upper echelon, but to the very top of the sport as a whole. After entering the UFC, he quickly became one of the sport's biggest stars, not only because of his incredible fighting ability, but because of how he built his persona. Funny press conferences, interviews, and promotion became part of his performance itself. He was turning the sport into an entertainment. At this stage, McGregor stops being just an athlete and becomes a character in the eyes of the media and the fans. In theoretical terms, this is where the anti-hero structure becomes visible. Someone admired, criticized, and constantly shifting depending on context and who is looking at it.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
A large part of McGregor's identity was built through press conferences that blurred the line between sport promotion and theatrical performance. His language often reinforced themes of control and dominance over the sport and its athletes itself.
Sorry I'm late, I just don't give a fuck!
This guy TKOs people. When I knock people out, they don't fucking move. They're not. Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that? You know damn well who I am. Who the fuck is that?
These statements frame competition not as participation, but as conquest for McGregor. In other moments, he positioned himself as having influence over the other structure of fights in the promotion. He was the only fighter that felt like had control over the fights themselves, on a level of executive function as a CEO, not just as an athlete. These moments are not about literal authority, and more about constructing a persona of authority, of total control within the narrative of MMA. You're fighting the man that controls your fate. During the build-up to his fight with Jose Aldo, McGregor also used highly aggressive promotional language during press events that intensified media attention and controversy. This included remarks referencing Aldo's background and environment in a way designed to escalate the rivalry and generate extreme psychological pressure ahead of the fight. Some say McGregor knocked out Aldo before the fight even started.
It was a different time. I would invade his favela on horseback and kill anyone that was not fit to walk. But we are in a new time, so I'll whoop his ass in July. Look into my eyes, little man. Little Brazilian. Ooh, vamos here. What you got to say now, face to face, man to man, what you got to say? What you got to say?
Rather than existing purely as sport promotion, these moments function as media events themselves, clipped, shared online, replayed online, as part of his evolving public identity.
Notorious!
Like Vincent van Gogh, he dedicated his life to his art and lost his mind in the process. That's happened to me. But fuck it. And that gold belt is around my waist. And my mother has a big mansion. My girlfriend has a different car for every day of the week. And my kids have everything they ever want. Then it will pay. Then I'm happy I lost my mind. Yeah? I'll die a crazy old man.
How much would you pay for fame and success? Your mind? Your body? McGregor paid both. With extreme success came money, and with money came visibility. McGregor transitioned rapidly from welfare-level income in Ireland to becoming one of the highest-paid figures in combat sports history. He directly referenced this shift himself.
I didn't have money before this, you know, like I said, I was collecting €188 a week of the social welfare, and now here I am with like 60 G's bonus and then my own pay. You know what I mean? I don't know what the fuck's going on.
The contrast becomes apparent and central to his public narrative. Origin versus outcome, struggle versus excess. At one point, can you even blame him?
I asked you what it was like to party with him. I mean, it was a good answer, but you totally slipped my jab. What's it like to party with him?
Partying is weakness for the soul, my friend, so I try and avoid it.
His lifestyle also became part of his image. Luxury fashion, business ventures, huge yachts, and public partying culture, and even an ownership of a Dublin pub, where many crimes have taken place at. In media terms, this stage often represents escalation rather than stability. Success becomes spectacle, and personality becomes his brand identity. His personality was his way to make money, and he was making a lot of money. MMA is a unique sport and a very new sport at that. It exists in a new space as a regulated sport of controlled violence. Some of the ramifications are still not clear because of how young the sport is. Because of the repeated head trauma risks associated with combat sports, sports science has raised many ongoing concerns about long-term neurological effects in fighters, including CTE. These broader discussions around CTE and chronic traumatic brain injury in combat sports are incredibly relevant in McGregor's case as well, and his connections to crime. Punches add up, and when you look at patterns in combat history, like Muhammad Ali, many times, in many cases, there's extreme damage to the brain of combat athletes. And when you look at other athletes like Mike Tyson, you can see how crime is intertwined with combat sports. Some say it's the background, some say it's that risk, lifestyle, or full of adrenaline junkies, but there is no doubt that crime and combat sports go hand in hand. In media discourse, ideas around violence, brain trauma, and behavioral intensity often become absorbed in broader narratives around fighters outside the cage or octagon. This contributes to a cultural environment where MMA athletes are sometimes interpreted through lenses that extend beyond the sport and into psychology and aggression narratives, and if they're bred to be criminals or if the sport formed them into criminals.
He picked up the phone and called Conor.
That's embarrassing.
Habib slapped me. Conor fueled up the G650 and loaded it up with Irish guys. They flew to New York and attacked the bus that he was on. Yeah. My staff was on board, and they literally called me and said, "We're being attacked right now by Conor McGregor."
One of the most widely reported controversies in McGregor's career occurred during UFC 223 Fight Week in New York amid his ongoing beef with Khabib Nurmagomedov, his complete inverse. Khabib comes from a strict Islam background, and he trains in the mountains of Dagestan, where he had a huge feud with McGregor in MMA.
Khabib, assalamu alaikum, and Conor, congrats on Proper 12.
Thank you, sir.
Could we get an official prediction on the fight?
You cannot say salam alaikum and congrats about whiskey. Ooh, slap him then. Do something about it.
McGregor, unfortunately, like many Irishmen, struggled with crime and alcoholism in the streets of Dublin, and it led him to a life of crime and fighting, often at the same time. McGregor arrived at Barclays Center during Media Week and was present alongside members of his team. Some he flew into from Ireland. During the event, he threw a dolly at a bus carrying UFC fighters, including Khabib. It resulted in injuries to helpless, innocent fighters and widespread disruption, where many of the fights were canceled on the card. Even Dana White noticed the Irish entourage that McGregor flew in from Dublin just to support him and find the location as Khabib wanted. McGregor was later charged with multiple offenses before resolving the case through a plea agreement that included community service and other conditions. Who knows if he got the same treatment as non-celebrities would have. What matters for this analysis is not just the legal outcome, though, but how quickly the incident became embedded in his public identity. In fact, many of his fans, not just from Ireland, supported his actions, as it revolved around his new personality. In media coverage, it did not remain an isolated act. It became part of his continuing narrative around volatility, aggression, control, and crime.
Come and get me! Come and get me!
McGregor has had several documented legal issues over the course of his career. These include a guilty plea to assault following a 2019 Dublin incident, charges related to the bus incident as mentioned, a 2019 arrest in Miami, a driving-related conviction in Ireland, and a sexual assault case in which he appealed. These incidents form part of the public record and are frequently referenced in media coverage. In fact, McGregor, although never has found real ties with, but is often associated with the Irish cartel, the Irish criminal group from Dublin, the same place as McGregor, that recently have been in the news as Daniel Kinahan of the cartel has been arrested in Dubai. There's no official ties to the group, but it just shows his connection to crime never stops. It is not just involved with the octagon, but organized crime in itself. However, their significance lies not only in their legal outcomes, but how they're also integrated into the broader narrative structure around the Notorious character. Crime in media theory is not just reported, it's constructed. McGregor's career demonstrates how individual incidents become part of a serialized narrative structure. Each controversy is absorbed into an ongoing arc involving rise, escalation, backlash, and an attempted reinvention. McGregor ran for president. He's announcing support to the fuel protests going on in Ireland at the moment. McGregor may attempt to change his brand, but the history will always be there. This is where moral panic theory becomes relevant, as social media and sports media often amplify incidents beyond their immediate context, reinforcing these perceptions of instability. McGregor is just another victim of the cycle of crime, especially in combat sports. If other athletes outside of MMA or boxing were involved in as many crimes, even just one crime, it would be a stain on their career. However, McGregor might have found the fine line of the perfect amount of crimes to commit, in a sadistic way to put it. If you commit enough crimes, you become known as a criminal. However, if you stay out of prison, you become known as a famous criminal or a fighter in McGregor's case. Maybe if he did one, it would stain his legacy, but if you do enough, people forget about the old ones. This is where comparison to crime media becomes useful. Films like Goodfellas and shows like The Sopranos are not just about crime in a literal sense. They're about identity, reputation, status, and the constant tension between public image and private reality. In some ways, Conor McGregor is the Irish Tony Soprano. You live a normal life with your family, while your career and your personal choices attempt to destroy that at any moment. In Goodfellas, success is built through escalation and eventually undone by pressure, ego, and consequences. In The Sopranos, characters constantly navigate between legitimacy and violence, with public perception often shaping their actions or understood. Characters like Tony and Chris Moltisanti often are destroyed by their own actions, but often never blame themselves for it. When applied to McGregor, the connection is not literal crime involvement, but the exact same structure in the blame being shifted. His career is often discussed through similar themes: rise and fall, controversy and backlash, and reinvention and public scrutiny. You have to cover up your mob ties through your garbage disposal. McGregor covers up his crimes through his fighting. And in moments of trouble or controversy, media coverage tends to frame events in a way that fits these storytelling patterns.
He checked is what broke your leg.
There was no check. There was not one of them I checked. Your wife is in me DMs, hey baby.
This is where MMA becomes part of a broader cultural system, where sport, entertainment, and crime narrative logic overlap in how stories are told, even when the reality is far more complex. For some reason, combat sport athletes are given passes on violent crimes, domestic abuse, murders, and the worst crimes you can think of. It's much more common in the sport. Some say it's tied to the CTE, ongoing brain trauma, or guys that were naturally bred to be violent. Whatever your theory is, it is a fact that there's a lot of crime in combat sports, and a lot of unchecked crime at that. Conor McGregor's career illustrates something broader than sport. It shows how modern media constructs meaning through narrative templates that are often borrowed from crime storytelling, true crime media, and dramatic television structures. He's not simply an athlete who's experienced controversy, he's a figure through whom media explores themes of ambition, excess, control, and downfall. Conor McGregor and his notorious lifestyle become less of a straightforward sporting figure and more in a case study of how fame is turned into crime.
You talking to me? We're together. Me and you. You're talking to me? You're talking to me? You're doubting me? After all we've been through?
At UFC 329, Conor McGregor announced his triumphant return in a rematch against Max Holloway, 13 years in the running. For 5 years, people questioned whether McGregor would ever make the walk again, especially after the Chandler incident.
Conor McGregor, you gotta come back and fight somebody!
Every comeback announcement was met with eye rolls. Nobody believed he'd really come back after all the injuries. But when fight week finally arrived, something did feel different. He did bring that mohawk back, which brought a lot of hope in my eyes. He looked focused, and honestly so much calmer than we've seen him in recent years, away from the crazy McGregor. It felt like the old Conor was back and showing up for one last run. The matchup couldn't have been more fitting, a full circle rematch against Max, where he tore the ACL in the first fight. And then the fight started, and McGregor came out exactly how we've seen him so many times before. He opened with one of those explosive jumping kicks, bouncing around the cage with the same fluid movement that made him one of the greatest strikers MMA's ever seen. Conor was known for his body movement, being a master of it with Gunnar Nelson when he was younger, and his ability to explode in and out of range, switch stances, and throw flashy kicks from crazy angles. This time, didn't happen. On the opening kick, his knee gives out. He tears his ACL less than a minute into his first fight in 5 years and has to concede the fight. to a very disappointed Max. The comeback was over before it ever had a chance to even begin. And after the fight, Dominic Cruz, UFC Hall of Famer, had a very good point that stuck with me.
I think the reason why he was coming back was to save his own life from the money, from the lifestyle that he's been living. I think that he's going to be facing that again. God's going to keep putting the same test in front of you until you choose different.
McGregor doesn't need the money anymore. He doesn't need the fame. He doesn't need another belt. He talked about how he's done with the partying. It's weakness for the soul, as he used to say. The one thing that's always given him structure, purpose, and maybe kept him sane is the fighting. And the more I thought about it, the more I believe Cruz, but also McGregor. I believe he is committed to his faith and to his training. I do believe he's been sleeping in the gym. That's why I believe him when he says he'll be back next year after surgery. And I think if his body doesn't fail him, the right version of McGregor will be back and is here to stay.
I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the he wants. Let me raise this. This is what I want to do. This is what I dreamed into reality. Oh, that looks good. That looks good. God bless.